Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am Chris Van Meter here with Andrew Boswell. We're getting ready to start the finals of the SCG Tour here in Worcester, Massachusetts for the Legacy Open, brought to you by Ultimate Guard. Kevin King on lands against Ed Demicco on Grixis Delver. Kevin did have the top seed, second seed coming into the top 8, so he's able to be on the play here. But Ed Demicco did mulligan to 5, and that's going to be real rough in this finals match.
Yeah, that is rough. Ed Demicco was in a similar situation in the previous round where he was up against a slower deck that was trying to lock him out of the game, the Goblin Prison deck, and Ed won on the back of very, very fast starts and his opponent slipping up a little bit. So we see here that Ed Demicco also has a rather fast start, but Kevin King, with this exploration, is also going to be able to accelerate his game plan. And because Kevin's on the play, it's going to be an uphill battle for Ed Demicco, and that isn't even accounting for the mulligan that he faced.
So Kevin has a Grove of the Burn Willows, a Rishadan Port, Maze of Ith, and now a Thespian Stage along with an Exploration on his side of the field. Ed Demicco has an Underground Sea, a Volcanic Island, and 2 Delver of Secrets. So it looks like we are resolving some Delver triggers here in Ed's upkeep.
Yeah, and a classic thing to do when you have 2 Delvers out is you put both triggers on the stack, you look at the top card for one. If it isn't something that flips your Delver, you'll have the opportunity to cast a Brainstorm before the other one resolves.
So it looks like neither of the Delvers are going to flip. Ed is just going to add a Scalding Tarn and a Deathrite Shaman to his battlefield and attack with 2 of his Delvers. Kevin is going to use Maze of Ith to stop one of them from dealing damage.
And Deathrite Shaman can be a good threat against the lands deck. The lands deck uses its graveyard as a resource. Life from the Loam is very important, and we've seen that, like in the previous matchup, Joe Lissette brought Rest in Peace in against Kevin King specifically to attack his graveyard, and the fact that Ed Demicco just has Deathrite Shaman in his main deck can prove to be quite useful.
Kevin has been able to find a copy of Dark Depths to go along with his Thespian Stage. Ed is going to put the Delver triggers on the stack. The first one is going to resolve and not flip. He's going to use his Scalding Tarn to fetch, while the other one is still on the stack. And I believe that Ed Demicco has a Stifle in his hand, which will actually give him some interaction for this Thespian Stage Dark Depths.
Yeah, so typically these Grixis Delver decks do not have Stifle, and under normal circumstances, Kevin would be able to just use Thespian Stage to copy Dark Depths, make a Merit Lage token, and then it would just be completely uncontested. Ed Demicco doesn't have access to cards like Swords to Plowshares or Terminus like Joe Lissette does. So normally these Grixis Delver decks are just stone cold to a Merit Lage token. The Stifle, though, is going to give Ed Demicco a chance to interact with it for at least one turn.
All right, well, one of the Delvers is going to flip. Ed is going to make a 20/20. Or Kevin's going to make a 20/20, but Ed is going to Stifle. Looks like he's going to stifle the Thespian Stage copy.
Thespian Stage copy. Another option he could have
Can't you
taken
just stifle the actual 20/20 and then Kevin would lose both lands?
Right, would be to allow the Thespian Stage to copy the Dark Depths, and then when it triggers to create the token, stifle that instead.
All right, well, Ed is going to attack with his Delvers. Kevin is going to Maze of Ith, the Insectile Aberration. A Wasteland is going to hit the Volcanic Island for Ed Demicco. Kevin's going to pass the turn back. Second Delver is not going to flip, but we're going to make a 20/20.
And that may just be game. The 20/20 is
Ed
just completely uncontested.
Ed's going to scoop it up, and I have to think that unless we are incorrect about that interaction, that Ed just kind of threw that away.
Yeah, maybe not. There's a lot of things to consider, but either way, I'm sure he's going to, stay focused and get ready for the next games and probably play great and hopefully push it to a game 3, because that would be really exciting.
Absolutely. He does get some more options here on the sideboard, so let's take a look at it. We have 4 Krosan Grip, 1 Bojuka Bog, 1 Karakas, 2 Tireless Tracker, 4 Sphere of Resistance, 2 Boil, and 1 Chalice of the Void on Kevin's side. What do we think he's going to do?
So I don't think Kevin is going to be doing a whole lot. I think the Chalice of the Void is going to be quite nice. Chalice on 1 is always good against these Delver decks. Boyle is going to be a one-sided Armageddon. That's going to be phenomenal. I don't think he'll bring in the Tireless Tracker. We could see that, but I think it's a little unlikely.
Now on Ed's side, we have 4 Cabal Therapy, a Null Rod, a Pithy Needle, an Umezawa's Jite, 2 Pyroblast, 1 Ancient Grudge, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Gurmag Angler, and 1 copy of Fire Covenant. How do we think Ed's going to sideboard?
So for the most part, I think Ed doesn't really have all the interaction he would really like to have for this land deck. So I think he might be grasping at straws a little bit. And when I say that, I think he might be bringing in a card like Cabal Therapy, even though it doesn't have very many applications. It might just be better than some of the stuff he has. The main cards that I think are specifically for the matchup, though, are going to be the 2 Surgical Extractions. You could also consider bringing in the Gurmag Anglers just so that he has a little bit more pressure.
I can see that. I also like the idea of utilizing Pithy Needle as a way to interact with the screen stage.
Yeah, that's a great call also.
Now, we've seen time and time again as we've had these land decks on camera, that non-basic lands are the heart of the Legacy format.
Man, your bridges are just so good.
And if you need to get some to finish out your land deck, our weekly sale is going on until Monday at 10:59 a.m. on the non-basic lands at StarCityGames.com weekly sale. So if you want to get Expeditions, Wastelands, Shocklands, Fetchlands, basically any non-basic land might be on sale there for our weekly sale. Make sure you check that out, StarCityGames.com. It ends Monday at 10:59 a.m. So hurry up before everything's done.
Yeah, and non-basic lands are really the core of any long-term collection. Like if you're interested in Modern, one of the best things you can do is just buy a bunch of fetch lands and a bunch of shock lands. Also, there's cards that you can usually pick up pretty cheap, but will have a moment where they end up skyrocketing price. Like for example, there's the filter lands. The black-green filter lands skyrocketed in price when it started getting played in Jund, and the black-green rock decks will come into prominence in Modern. So having a good set of non-basic lands can be beneficial and is really the cornerstone of any collection.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I don't have a big collection, but I got all the non-basic lands covered.
You do got your shocks and fetches?
Yeah, I'm not even trying to push it more than,
Well, you do need to have those basic lands and lands in general to be able to play. And these 2 players, Kevin King, Ed Demicco, they're in our finals of the Legacy Open. Let's take a quick look at what they're actually playing for here while they finish up their shuffling. First place, a whopping $5,000. Man, you can get a lot of non-basic lands with $5,000.
Yeah, that is some sweet Star City cash.
And 30 SCG points along with an invitational invite. Runner-up is $2,000. So, even if the person in this match that doesn't win, they still get $2,000 and 25 points, and that is so many points.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really relevant in this particular situation too, because we're seeing 2 players who are obviously great. They've done really well all through the tournament, but spiking an Open can really kick off a career. I mean, who knows? Maybe if Kevin King wins this, we look back, a year from now and say this was the moment that really started Kevin King's career as a Magic player, and he's just been going for broke ever since and wrecking the field. Here it looks like we've got a pretty sweet Gataxian Probe, and we see both of those boils. So the fact that Ed Demicco sees them is going to be pretty beneficial for him. And Kevin doesn't have a particularly fast hand, but he certainly has his land drops covered, and he's got that Mazavith to do some early defense and that crop rotation to provide a little bit of utility in his draw.
So Ed Demicco is going to start off with the Gataxian Probe and fall to 18. We'll see a couple boils, that crop rotation, and a bunch of different lands. Ed's going to lead off with a Delver of Secrets. I feel like Boyle might be too slow in this match.
It's certainly slow. You do run into situations, particularly when you're on the draw against a Grixis Delver deck, where it may not be as good to attack their resources. This is one of the reasons why a lot of times I'm a fan of bringing in Blood Moon against Delver decks, but maybe trim them or have not as many when you're on the draw, because when they get ahead on the board, if you're answering their mana base rather than their threats, you may be too far behind and not have enough time to answer their board afterwards.
All right, well, Kevin is going to play a gamble. There's the Grove of the Burn Willows that we saw from his opening hand, so what's still in his hand, nobody knows. But it's likely a Life from the Loam.
Yeah, it could be a loam. It could also be just something
An
like a punishing
exploration.
fire, or it could be something like an exploration to accelerate his game plan.
All right, well, Ed's Delver is going to flip on turn 2, revealing a Brainstorm. It looks like Ed has a Surgical Extraction in hand, which could end up being very good for him.
Another thing that it could just be a Tabernacle of Pendrell Vale. That playing that early can put Ed Demicco in a little bit of a bad spot with his mana. And if Kevin King can sequence a Tabernacle of Pendrell Vale into a Boil, that would be a great way to answer not only Ed Demicco's mana base, but his creature base as well.
That is a very good point. Tabernacle is such a good card.
The one risk that Kevin King would have to worry about, though, is if Ed Demicco sandbags a Wasteland for the moment right before Boil, Kevin can be in a bad spot where he's committed to a game plan that isn't going to quite work out.
Well, Ed is going to fall to 17. He's going to use a Polluted Delta to find a Volcanic Island. And things seem to be going pretty well for him here. Looks like he has 2 Surgical Extractions in his hand.
And 2 Delvers. So this is a
Delver
lot of
Secrets.
pressure. This is how Ed Demicco wins these games. It's particularly noticeable when he's on the play, but he really needs to get in quick and get in underneath Kevin King.
All right, well, a Mox Diamond is going to resolve, discarding a Maze of Ith. Kevin's going to play a Thespian Stage for his turn.
And it looks like Ed Demicco does have a Gurmag Angler, and this Stifle is something that can prove quite useful in this matchup.
Yep, Delver of Secrets is going to flip, revealing a Stifle. The Insectal Aberrations are going to attack Kevin down to 11. That Stifle will end up being very good, stopping a quick 20-20. All right, Ed's just going to pass the turn. Thespian Stage is going to copy a Taiga.
And this could be a good turn for Boyle, but the more immediate threat are these 2 Delvers. They represent a 2-turn Glock, and so far Kevin hasn't been able to put up any kind of offense. He discarded his Maze of Ith to his Mox Diamond, so that makes me think that he has something else going on to deal with these. And a 20-20 would be good, but he knows that his opponent has a Stifle, which has got to be a little worrisome.
Kevin's just going to play that Dark Depths and pass the turn back to Ed Demicco. Ed's going to attack. We're going to try and make a 20-20. Oh, Ed's going to stifle the Thespian Stage ability again. He's a very good player. That must be how you have to attack it. Just going to pass the turn back to Kevin. Ooh, Kevin has a Wasteland here now, though, so he could... Interesting, he doesn't just waste Ed and then make a 20-20.
Yeah, I would like to do that also.
Another Stifle.
Wow, and another Stifle. And could this be game? So this looks like a crop rotation for maybe a Maze of Ith to narrowly survive.
And Daze is going to stop
Demicco
it.
has the Daze, and we are going on to a game 3. Ooh, baby.
We are going to go on to a
Fierce.
game 3. Man, this has been real exciting.
Yeah.
Lightning fast. Both players have just been pummeling each other. Do we think that anybody's going to change their sideboarding plans? Because it looked like Kevin had Croson Grip in his deck when he was searching through it, and we saw Boil, which might be a little too slow.
Yeah, I like Boyle now that Kevin King is on the play again. It did seem a little too slow when he was on the draw, but he did keep it in when he was on the draw. I think he's definitely going to have it now that he's on the play. No question.
On Ed's side, do we think we're going to change anything? Is Gurmag Angler really where we want to be? We did see both Surgical Extractions.
Yeah, I do think Gurmag Angler, he just wants a good beefy threat. He wins by having a fast curve out and a lot of pressure. He doesn't actually win by having a lot of interaction, generally speaking. Like the main part of that game was the fact that he had 2 Delvers that both flipped, and he had a little bit of interaction, but you could see that interaction wouldn't have held its value had the game gone much longer. Cards like Daze, they're going to lose its value. Stifle on Thespian Stage is not really a long-term solution. So, you know, Ed, he really needs to have a lot of pressure. Gurmag Angler's going to add to that.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, we are going into game 3 here of our finals between Ed Demicco and Kevin King. Who's going to come out on top? Lands or Grixis Delver? We're going to have to wait and find out. But in the meantime, we can talk a little bit about the Eldritch Moon pre-release.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to get this sweet playmat, Lily Llama and her Eldritch Groove,
Looking cute in her purple dress.
July 16th and 17th. Normally, these playmats are limited edition and only available at the StarCityGames.com Game Center in Roanoke, Virginia. However, limited edition playmat will be available at participating stores. Go.StarCityGames.com/pre-release. We are running out of time. If you are wanting to get this in your local game store, let them know to get a hold of us so that they can get signed up for that and get some of them out to you, because these playmats are awesome. They are only going to be available for a limited amount of time around the pre-release and only available at those stores. They go ahead and get hooked up with Star City Games for it. So we're going into the last game here. Kevin King is going to be on the play with his Lance deck playing against Ed Demicco on Grixis Delver. He's looking for a quick 20-20 to try and put this game out of reach.
Yeah, and we'll see. Kevin King is on the play, so he is going to have the advantage, which is quite valuable. A lot of the edge that Ed Demicco can get that can snowball into a victory is related to tempo. And because Kevin King is on the play, that tempo is going to be decreased.
Okay. And it looks like we've gotten a little bit of clarification from Jarvis via Twitter that Dark Depths is a state-based action. And so if you stifle it, it will just check again, and then it will happen again. So Ed is playing it as correctly as he possibly can.
Perfect.
Thank you very much for the clarification, Jarvis Yu.
So this exploration from Kevin King, I was talking about tempo. It's going to allow Kevin King to accelerate even faster so that it doesn't fall behind like he did in Game 2. That said, Demicco has this Deathrite Shaman, which is also going to accelerate him. So both of these players are off to great starts, having access to more than their normal amount of mana, and we should see some pretty powerful plays coming up from both of them.
Yeah, so Kevin has a Taiga and a Riftstone Portal, or a Rishadan Port, along with an Exploration. Ed has a you don't see a Badlands casting a Deathrite Shaman very often.
Yeah, you really don't see Badlands in Legacy very much.
Well, here it is. It's not going to be analogous with its actual name. It's not a bad land. It does let you cast your spells. Gamble is going to be cast for Kevin.
What do you love the flavor text on that.
What do you think he's getting?
When you've got nothing, you might as well trade it for something else.
Right?
I think that there's a good chance he's just looking for some sort of Thespian Stage or Dark Depths. Seems like he's really leaned on that in these matchups. They've been one of the more powerful things he can do. And there's the Dark Depths, which he might have gotten from Gamble. It also wouldn't be, I think, too surprising if Kevin just went and got Punishing Fire. That said, if he gets Punishing Fire and doesn't have access to the Grove or the Burn Wells, he may be able to deal with this Deathrite Shaman, but not necessarily the next one.
All right, Ed is going to Wasteland that Dark Depths. Let's see if he has a Surgical Extraction for the Dark Depths. Nope, just a Deathrite Shaman. He can go ahead and eat that Dark Depths with his currently active Deathrite Shaman if he needs to.
And he doesn't have another land drop, which is a little worrisome. He will be able to start eating away at Kevin's graveyard, and he can protect his land with the Stifle that he has in hand, so he's not in horrible shape, but he would really like to have another land.
All right, well, Punishing Fire is going to take care of that Deathrite Shaman. Ed is going to eat a card out of Kevin's graveyard. It's going to be the Dark Depths, and he's going to cast a Brainstorm.
And he is able to find a Daze.
Looks like Ed has some Wastelands in his hand, so he does have lands. He just opted to not play one.
Yeah, that's rather an interesting play. He may just want to conceal that information from Kevin King. He may also want to just protect his wastelands from his opponent's wastelands. There's a few different reasons why you may not play them. I think he might have had one and drawn the second off this Brainstorm, but I'm not 100% sure, unfortunately. I know for sure that he drew a Daze off that Brainstorm. He was wishing that he had an island in play, but
yeah.
And this is one of the reasons that a lot of people choose to ensure that all of their lands in their Delver decks are islands of some kind.
It's very important with the card days. Sometimes you want to be able to have a land that can cast both Deathrite Shaman and Lightning Bolt.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certainly some good arguments for having the bad lands as well.
Ed is going to eat the Punishing Fire out of Kevin's graveyard, knock him down to 17.
And these Deathrite Shamans have done some good work. Punishing Fire and Dark Depths are both very potent, recurable sources that Kevin has access to, and by exiling them, Demicco's been able to cut them off.
Also, Badlands doesn't die to a boil.
Badlands does not die to a boil. That's a good point.
We got him.
Got him. We figured it out. Ed Demicco, he's got the tech.
All right, he's going to use his Scalding Tarn, fall down to 19. So we get a copy of Underground Sea. Just going to cast another Deathrite Shaman. Pass the turn.
And these Deathrite Shamans are kind of nice against the lands deck. Harassing his graveyard is great. They can also be flexible in that they can generate some good mana to catapult Ed Demicco into his mid-game.
All right. Well, Kevin is just going to play another Rishadan Port and pass the turn to Ed. We're going to tap an Underground Sea in the upkeep. We're going to do a little eating action with the Deathrite Shaman.
And the mana denial plan of lands is a core part of its game plan. And it's normally very oppressive. The fact that Ed Demicco has access to these Deathrite Shamans is pretty nice for him.
All right, so here we're going to have a Wasteland. Ed is going to eat a land out of Kevin's graveyard, play a Delver of Secrets. Just going to pass the turn.
And now Ed Demicco has a nice form of pressure, and that Wasteland is probably being saved for something like a Maze of Ith.
Kevin has a Forest. Just going to pass the turn back to Ed. All right, Delver of Secrets trigger on the stack. He's just going to go blind. It is not going to flip.
And Ed Demicco is in a pretty nice situation right now. He's got a little bit of interaction. He's got these Deathrite Shamans to make sure that he can not only harass Kevin's graveyard, but also ensure that he has access to mana despite the Rishadan ports and Wastelands out of his opponent's deck. And he's got some pressure in the form of this Delver. And Kevin really hasn't mounted any significant defense at this time.
Ed is going to add another copy of Wasteland to his battlefield. Attack for 1 with Delver of Secrets. Going to knock Kevin down to 14, and we're going to see a boil here out of Ed Demicco. He might even just daze it to put the Volcanic or the Underground Sea back in his hand. He does only have 1 land that it destroys. He's going to float a blue mana and daze the boil. Kevin will let it get countered. He's going to float a black mana, and then he's going to eat the boil with the Deathrite Shaman. That's going to drop Kevin down to 12.
Yeah, and this is getting a little grim for Kevin. He's starting to run out of resources, and there's not a whole lot that he can draw that will get him out of this in a hurry. It's going to be a long slog. He's going to have to find probably an answer to those Deathrite Shamans first, and that could be in the form of Punishing Fire, but he's going to need potentially 2 Punishing Fires to deal with the Deathrite Shamans, and then after that he may be able to deal with the Insectile Aberration. But a top deck like Maze of Ith isn't going to be able to do it, or Tabernacle of Pendrevale, because Ed Demicco has those kind of cards covered with the Wastelands.
All right, well, Delver is going to flip, revealing a daze. It's going to attack Kevin down to 7.
And we may be very close to crowning a new champion. Ed Demicco has Kevin King on the ropes.
Kevin's going to tap down both of Ed's Wastelands on his end step with his ports. We're going to draw a card here. Do we have Thespian Stage Dark Depths to try and make a 2020? There's Thespian Stage.
You know, I really like Ed. And Kevin King
Kevin is just going to
hand.
extend the hand. Ed Demicco is going to win this. Grixis Delver, 2-1.
Yeah,
Isn't this what happened in Seattle at the
yeah, this
Legacy
is a
Grand
repeat.
Prix?
This is a repeat, but this was a phenomenal match. Kevin King, I think he's going to be one of the rising stars on the Star City Tour. We'll have to see if he starts traveling a little bit more after having so much success this weekend. Ed Demicco, though, he's a new player, someone that we're not familiar with, and he has a unique take on this Grixis Delver deck. The Badlands is something that you don't really see too often. This is Ed Demicco's third top 8. Oh, man. So, again, though, back to his deck list, a really unique take on Grixis Delver. He's playing 4 Stifle. I'm sure he caught a lot of people by surprise. That's something that the Grixis Delver decks normally don't play with.